This is Michael James, your host for this morning's edition, and I'm here with Dean Milano. And Dean is the author of the new book, The Chicago Music Scene, the 1960s and 1970s. Dean, you know, in between the segments here, we were talking, and I actually said to you, I said, anything you really want to tell us about today? And you mentioned an interesting picture and a story that comes out of your book.
Yeah, there's a story in the book, a picture of the band called the Honey Huggers, which was Tommy Ponce's jazz band. And Jeannie Lambert and Linda DeLorto were the singers in that band. And they were telling me that they had a 5-night-a-week gig at a club in the city one year. And one night, the owner of the club said it might be a good idea for them to pack up all their equipment and take it home that night. And they were like, why? What happened? Have we been fired? He says, no, you're not fired, but you might want to take your equipment home tonight. So they loaded up their equipment into the van, took it home, and found out an hour later the club blew up and burned onto the ground. So obviously something shady was going on there.
Well, there's certainly probably been many shady things connected to music in this town as well as in other towns. In this segment, Dean, let's go down a list and talk about some of the musicians in the book. What do you remember about Tom Dundee, our friend who passed away a couple years ago, but he was there in the folk scene?
Yeah, much loved musician in Chicago. I mean, boy, when he passed away, it was a shocker to the Chicago folk community. And Mick Scott, of course, toured with Tom Dundee quite a bit, and Mick talked a lot about how wonderful it was to work with Tom. He was just an all-around great guy and a great singer-songwriter, and he's really missed quite a bit. Yeah.
What about Erwin Helfer? He shows up in your book.
Yeah, he was a fantastic blues piano player. And to tell you the truth, I didn't know much about him until people started telling me, you've got to get Erwin Helfer into your book. So I went down to the Chicago Public Library, Harold Washington Library, and they had a wonderful picture of Erwin that I was able to get into the book, and I was thankful that I did, because now people know about Erwin Helfer once again. Yeah.
And, you know, out of the past, most of this is a blast from the past, but I see you had a picture of Howie Berkman. And one of my earliest exposures to the inner workings of bands was meeting Howie and Al Goldberg, and they had a band called Yama and the Karma Dusters.
Right.
And I still have that old kind of homemade album, but they had a place sort of off of Clark Street down in you know, south of Diversey. I'm not quite sure where that was. Things were a little cloudy, but they had a place called the Euphoria Blimp Works.
Oh, right, and it was a sound company, apparently. Yeah. And that was the connection. It was a sound company and a band, apparently, yeah.
And they actually had they may have been the sound company. Remember there was that sort of Love-In in Lincoln Park?
Yeah, the Be-In.
Yeah,
the Griffith Harder Union played at the Be-In, and thousands of people came down to that event, apparently. There's a picture in the book of that event, too, and tons of people were there, yeah.
How about Steve Hashimoto? He's a wonderful musician.
Oh,
he
yeah.
played in a lot of different kind of bands. He's a jobbing musician, and he puts out, you know, from the trenches.
Right.
News from the trenches.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he actually designed the logo for the Chicago Pop Festival here that you're looking at. And he designed the graphics for my last CD I just put out, too. And, yeah, he's probably one of the most working musicians in Chicago. He's always working because he's a great bass player. And, of course, he was with Wacker Drive, which is featured in the book there. And I think in Wacker Drive, he was playing trumpet in that band. Before he began playing bass, he was a trumpet player.
I think he can play a lot of instruments.
I'm sure he probably can, yeah.
Well, you mentioned Wacker Drive, and Wacker Drive, that, you know, every time you mention someone, it rings a bell. And ding, ding, ding.
Right.
And one of the things that we did back before the Heartland was we had a group called Rising Up Angry, and we had put together Cooperative Energy Supply, which was a music production company. We did most of our events, well, we did a lot of them in a lot of places, but we did them at the old Midland Hotel. And we tried to bring different kinds of music and different kids from different neighborhoods to create this scene. And Wacker Drive was one of the bands we had there.
Oh, yeah.
And there were a lot of other people. You have a picture in there of Killin' Floor, which is a guy named Michael McGraw, along with others. Now he's out in Hawaii. But they came out of Kelly High School, and they played some benefits. Did you yourself play any, you talk a little bit in the book about the social and political scene. Did you get to play at any benefits?
Oh, yeah, especially during the Vietnam War. We did a lot of anti-war benefits back in those days. And that's one of the things that I wanted to get in the book, which is why I wanted to get the Cooperative Energy Supply and your Midland Hotel events into the book, because it pointed out how different the music scene was in those days, in that the music scene was not owned by the corporations back then. The music was really owned by the people. As corny as that sounds, it was true. I mean, the people really controlled the music, and it was our music. And then the corporations kind of took over later on. And people who are, a little bit younger don't understand how different that was. It was a very different scene back then.
You have some people that I hadn't remembered, a band called the Dirty Words. What do you know about them?
Well, that was Justin Pomeroy's band, and some of those people are going to be.
And he's an acupuncturist these days.
That's what I hear, yeah. But some of his people are going to be at the event tomorrow at the Abbey Pub, starting at 1 o'clock, and they'll be signing autographs and stuff too. And I know the Dirty Words were a very well-respected band in those days, because I know I made the mistake of talking to a couple of musicians and saying, "Now, you were in the Dirty Words, weren't you?" And they all said, "Oh man, I wish I was in the Dirty Words, man. They were the greatest." So apparently, they were a very well-respected band. Yeah.
I have a couple of kids who are pretty hot musicians. One of them plays in a band called the Smith Westerns, and they've been traveling around the country. And I'm wondering how you, Dean Milano, author of this book, do you see a way that you can reach out to the younger bands around town, the younger musicians? How would you do this? Because, my experience as a dad is always trying to hip my kids to some earlier music is it takes a while for them to grab it. They'll say, "Oh, sure, yeah." But then later on, they'll be digging deep through the old vinyl.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you're in touch with younger musicians, if you see a way to kind of maybe incorporate some younger bands with some of the older bands, and as you promote your book. I'm just throwing this out at you.
Yeah. No, you're right. I have to admit that I'm not that in touch with the younger bands, because it doesn't seem like there are as many younger bands out there as there used to be. When we were kids, there was a garage band on every block. Every kid in your class in school was in a band. Today, I don't really get that sense. The kids today, so many of them are more interested in DJs and karaoke, and I don't see as many of them interested in live music and performing live music. And I'm hoping maybe this book will spark some interest back in live music again and get some of the kids interested. Because with kids, if you want to get kids interested in some of the great music, let them listen to the Beatles. If they haven't heard the Beatles, they'll get hooked on the Beatles, and that'll move them in other things, other directions too. Yeah.
On the other hand, though, you got to think that there were not big music stores like today. We have not only the Guitar Workses, the Guitar Center. There's an awful lot of people buying equipment, more than ever. So I'm not sure. I would bet there are a lot of young bands.
I hope you're right. Yeah.
Well, I have one thing we didn't mention that you may want to talk about, because they certainly were very key to the music scene, is the Old Town School of Folk Music. Tell us a little bit about how maybe they impacted you and how they helped you with the book, because you got pictures of them in there.
Oh, yeah. Colby Maddox is in charge of the archives at the Old Town School of Folk Music, and he was very helped me. He let me into the archives, and I was able to take out any photos that I wanted to use for the book, and a lot of the photos you see, of course, are from the Old Town School of Folk Music archives. And that school is very influential on the folk music in Chicago and around the whole country too. And in fact, the first picture in the book in the folk music scene is of Jim McGuinn from the Byrds, and he's playing at the Old Town School of Folk Music, because that's where he played back in the early '60s.
Was he from here?
Yeah, he was based right here in Chicago.
See, I didn't ever know that till today when I read that book.
And he and I were emailing back and forth about that. I was surprised he responded to my emails, but he did. And he said, "Hey, I love the picture you got of me. Let's put it in the book. It's wonderful." So he was very cool about that.
Well, Dean Milano, I want to thank you so much for coming on live from the Heartland. This book of yours, The Chicago Music Scene, is really wonderful. And a lot of people are going to see it, and a lot of people are going to spread the word on it. For people who want to get the book up close, Dean will be signing copies in the Heartland General Store for a little while, and tomorrow is the big event inaugurating the book. It's the Chicago Pop Festival, and it's going to take place tomorrow, the 22nd, from 3 to 6.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Oh, 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock.
It's going to go till they kick us out. We may go till 8 or 9. I don't know. We'll see.
And it's going to be at?
The Abbey Pub at 3420 West Grace and Elston, and there's going to be free food for your ticket price, the whole bit. So a lot of musicians.
Dean, do you have a website that people can go to?
ChicagoPopFestival.com. You can go there, get all the information on the festival and the book, and you can order the book through the website, the whole bit.